as a more and more interesting business opportunity. And then we should not forget about India's geostrategic weight. We have the Indo-Pacific, you have the not always easy neighbor to the north. We see India's involvement with world politics, also with the war of aggression in Ukraine. So I think that means that it is very timely and extremely interesting to come to India. Now, when you ask why is the Chancellor coming at all, I tried to answer that in my first remark, saying that he appreciates or he attaches high value to the fact that that there is a regular and always and intense discussion and comparing of notes going on with the Prime Minister. But of course we have a very broad agenda. You know, Germany and India are long-time partners, and you would be surprised how deep and how detailed the relations are by now. But maybe let me just quote four different areas of where I feel that the Chancellor and the Prime Minister will elaborate a bit more than others. As I said, the agenda is very rich. One is, of course, business. I started by saying business is very important, and business is for us a new opportunity. We have seen the German-Indian trade balance growing, even though COVID has dimmed or has made economic progress slower. But with India and Germany, that was not the case. We are now at a trade balance of 30 billion a year, which is quite remarkable. A balanced trade balance, so to speak, so 15 billion from the Indian side, 50 billion from the German side. That's also very noteworthy, I would say, and there is ample room to improve this even, and therefore the Chancellor will be accompanied by a huge and very substantive business delegation. We have, I think, 12 CEOs of big German companies. Big meaning not only Siemens and others, but also small and medium-sized, but with a very big portfolio and quite an impressive turnover. So that's one area of engagement with the Indian side. We'll have a business event with both leaders. Also, there is a business event with both leaders where business delegations on both sides will present their views and will discuss with the leaders. So the second item which will be very high on the agenda is climate change and energy transition. I think you are aware that Germany and India have concluded this partnership for green and sustainable development. It's a very, very interesting partnership where basically we have a portfolio of 1.3 billion a year where projects with the Indian side, with the cooperation of India, are developed on the question of energy transition, on the question of smart cities, more efficient energy use in cities, and also very important biodiversity, which is a very important factor in this. And this, in this context, the Chancellor and the Prime Minister will certainly discuss how the world is looking at climate change and how in international fora India and Germany can play their role in fighting climate change and trying to decarbonize. This is a very interesting topic. I think it's very timely, and India has been a very interesting partner for Germany with a very smart and extremely creative way of tackling crime, not only in the government, also in the civil society. So we attach high value to this Indian sort of thinking in this context. Third element is a very specific and bilateral one. Is skilled labor migration. India is with its human capital and its young, very well-trained generation, is a huge provider of talent to the world, and Germany actually right now is in need of this talent, and therefore you might remember we have concluded this migration agreement between India and Germany. I think we will also talk about legal and regular migration, how we can improve ways and also accelerate paths to a work permission in Germany. And I think there is, from both sides, a big interest. I want to state in this context that We have 35,000 students of Indian students in Germany, and another 18,000 in the pipeline here. So there is an explosion of Indians going to Germany. We are very happy with this. It's a very good sign. We are very glad that Indians choose Germany as their destination for studies, and we with all the challenges that imposes on us and the visa section, we will try to accommodate as quickly as possible. But that's a very good sign, because once you have finished your studies in Germany, you have a year to look for a job, and once you get a job, you get the work permit after that. And I can assure you that Indian students excel in many ways, and they get a job very quickly. And the last point, it's number 4 now, the last point I would like to mention is the fact that the Chancellor, of course, will talk geopolitics with the Prime Minister. So we see Russia and Ukraine very high on the agenda. You are aware that tomorrow is the anniversary, if I can say that, of the war, the Russian war in Ukraine. This will be, we have seen President Biden in Ukraine, and we have listened to Putin's speech yesterday. So this will be a very important item on the agenda. But I think it should not be restricted to that. Your northern neighbor China certainly will be on the agenda. Indo-Pacific, everything which is with a link to Indo-Pacific will be on the agenda. And I think there is ample opportunity to discuss a very, very difficult international environment where we see India as a very influential and extremely valuable partner in discussing these questions. I stop here and take your questions.
Hi. My name is Nishtha Gautam, and I work with the Quint. You underlined the idea of growing trade, which is already quite robust. Given that Indian media is abuzz with wiping the way of quite a substantial amount of wealth from the markets, thanks to the Adani Hindenburg scandal, as it were, is it going to have any impact on?
Frankly, we see the Adani Hindenburg from an observer point of view. I see in India more than 2,000 German business being very active, and we are talking small and medium-sized enterprises, but also the giants are there. And I can tell you that most of them, I would say the overwhelming majority of them, are doing a very, very good business in India. So basically, what we see is what we will face is that. The business delegation that will come will certainly try to get in contact with their Indian partners. There will be bilateral agreements between firms, between companies. This will be what we are expecting. I would say that what the German business is really wanting is the FTA. The FTA between the European Commission and India, that would ease up our business in India in a substantive way, and will lead to undoubtedly a huge new amount of FDI. So when I talk to German business, India is basically the only comparable market when you compare it to China. The German focus on China is put into question right now. We have a clear, also the government encourages business to diversify, and India is basically the most interesting market when you compare it to China. Still, there is some reserves because there are some regulations and tariffs that are impeding or preventing more business to come to India. So therefore, I think the German business is very, very interested in getting this FTA done. That would change. It would be a sea change in Indo-European business relations, and that would be extremely beneficial for both sides, also for Germany. So that's basically, I think, on the agenda when it comes to business.
You said there are 12 CEOs coming. Can you identify the names of the companies they represent?
It's not, the list is not, the list is not comprehensive right now. I think there is still some last minute changes, but I think SAP is one of them, Siemens is one of them. There is Renk, which is a very impressive German machine producer. There is quite a lot of interesting smaller companies who do renewables in India. I mean, Germany is in the private sector. There is no other country that invests so much in India on renewables, on energy transition than Germany. So we'll have a couple of those who are there. So you will have a good mix of smaller and bigger companies. ThyssenKrupp is coming also. So you can expect a really substantive delegation. So 30 billion is a good trade balance, but it's way too little. Actually, it should be, should be 5 times as big. Yeah,
so how much focus will be on defense? Are we expecting some pacts to be signed or some defense deal to be announced?
Defense will be on the agenda, there is no doubt, and it will be an item that will be discussed between the Prime Minister and the Chancellor. I'm not aware as of yet that we will conclude some defense deal, but there are a couple of projects that the German side finds very interesting, and I'm sure that they'll be tackled.
So, Sridhar from Asian Age. So, you said Russia and Ukraine conflict will be high on the agenda. So, it's been a year since it broke out and lots of ups and downs. So, what do you now expect from India? Because the West initially expected India to, go a little a mile longer and condemn Russia. It didn't happen. And now India is buying a lot of Russian oil. So, what are your expectations from India now regarding the Ukraine conflict? What do you want India to do?
So, I think I have made it clear time and again that India buying oil from Russia is none of our business, basically. That's something that the Indian government decides, and as you get it at a very, very low price, I cannot blame the Indian government to buy it. But what we would like to see, of course, is an Indian engagement at some stage that will, after a while, come to, India is a very appropriate candidate at some stage to, maybe come up with some solution. But I don't think that this is the time now, frankly. I say that with all due caution because we have listened to what Putin has said yesterday. And when you want to find a solution to a conflict, you need 2 parties being prepared to find this solution. And what we heard yesterday, what President Putin said yesterday, I think you will have realized that he didn't mention the word negotiations or peace one single time. So India has a very, very skilled diplomacy, very good diplomacy. I think if they want to step up, they have to find the good moment to step up. And, from what I can say, this moment is not now.
We'll go on the table.
Sir, the Chancellor will be going to Bangalore on one of the 2 days. So, what's his program there? Will he, by any chance, going to be visiting HAL also?
I think he'll see an Indian company what's the name? Sun City, is it? Sun City? So a company that is very interesting because it's an Indian company that reuses batteries, that makes new batteries from old batteries. That's a very interesting technology, and I think he wants to see that technology. And then he will go to SAP, which is a German IT company, and will sit down with Indian startups and Germans. And then there is some minor little 2 or 3 other, minor, you'll see. Let's say you'll see.
So, Germany has a long experience of making U-boats, undersea boats. Now you are very keen to go ahead with a project in India. Is that likely for discussion? And can you tell us where it stands now?
Yeah, it's at the very beginning, and I think there is intention from both sides to look into that, and I'm sure it will be tackled or it will be discussed during the talks. I'm also very sure that you would not find some agreement or announcement so far, but it's too early. We are in the process of discussing that with the Indian side.
I just would like to know how significant would be the cooperation on energy security. I mean, when there's a facing global energy security crisis, particularly fossil fuel. So what will be the component, and are you looking at any specific projects for energy cooperation?
So I think, as I said before, we have this, we have the single biggest cooperation budget, I think, in India. There is no other country that has a comparable budget. We have 1.3 billion, and all this money goes together with the Indian side in energy transition. So let me give you one example. There is, in Rajasthan, there is an energy provider, and when he wants to change his energy mix, let's say, saying that more renewables, less fossil, this will be supported by these credit lines, by these programs. And so we are on very many levels, grassroots levels like top levels, we are involved with this energy transition. And when I said at the beginning that the creativity and the ingenuity of the Indian side is very attractive to us, I think you will find solutions here that are quite fabulous. Yeah? So that's why this budget goes into this question. India is a huge country, it's the most populous country in the world, so it matters when it comes to emissions. So, but it's also one of the most creative hubs in the world when it comes to renewables, and that's what we are very interested in. And we will, talk about sharing technology. We will talk about what to do in order to decarbonize in a sustainable way that does not go, is not detrimental to the Indian population.
Ambassador Smita Sharma, with all the talks around shared democratic principles from G7 to G20, are the issues of increasing hate assemblies in India, hate speeches, lynchings that are being reported, as well as the attack on freedom of press? We've seen the surveys happen in the BBC. Are these issues that are going to be matters of discussion, or market dynamics, China, these will overshadow really the talks of these democratic principles?
So, the agenda is very open. I'm sure that there will be also talk about internal situation in India. I'm not, privileged to know all the brief of the Chancellor so far, so I don't just know whether this is how he will address this, but I can imagine that this, that they are covering a broad way of, a broad range of things, and I'm not excluding that that's also on the agenda.
Sir, when your security advisor was here last couple of days back, he had said that there are many mediators in the West also, besides India, who would like to mediate for the Ukraine war. Can you throw light on who these mediators could be, and has Europe reached out to Putin ever to stop the war?
So, as you might know, the Chancellor is every now and then on the telephone with Putin, and so is the French President. So there is I would not say a very regular, but an uninterrupted communication between the Kremlin and some European capitals. We have to be honest, this communication so far hasn't delivered basically nothing. But I think we believe in diplomacy, and we believe that this, at the end of the day, this crisis must be solved diplomatically, but it must be solved in a way that both sides can accept it. Yeah. So the conditions that the Russian side is coming up with, namely that the annexed territories should be recognized, is absolutely out of the question. It's absolutely out of the question. It's not a basis for negotiations. And let me be very clear here, and we see this is a very important moment after 1 year. I think the Russian side has thought, they were very surprised by the unity of the West, and they also were very surprised by the patience and the sort of the strategic patience of the West, if I may say. And this will continue. And you see, we will continue to help Ukraine to defend its territory. It stops at their borders, but it's clear that our aim is to sustain the international order that comprises the safety of borders. It is unacceptable that a country just moves into another country for land grab. That's not acceptable. And therefore, I think Europe and the United States, we have seen a very impressive visit by President Biden lately, day before yesterday. I think we are very clearly committed to helping suppress Ukraine as long as Ukraine needs this help.
So, when you say annexation, do you mean the Crimea also?
We have our position to Crimea is crystal clear. We have said it from the beginning. Crimea, for us, is an integral part of Ukraine.
Sir, there were reports about an American hand being in the blowing up of Nord Stream 1. So, is Germany demanding any answers, carrying out any investigations of their own? Is there a lack of trust now between Germany and the US after this?
So, as you are aware, Denmark, Sweden and Germany are doing an investigation in this matter. So far, I haven't seen any results. I have heard about a very strange meeting of the Security Council where people, the Russian side, have started to sing in the Security Council and other peculiarities, let's say. I'm not aware of any sort of proof or clear indication that the United States of America is behind this attack. I would be very surprised also. But so far, I think we have to wait for the result of the investigation.
So you mentioned about China in your initial remarks. So how much the Chinese aggressiveness will be as part of the conversation? And secondly, at the UNGA, we know the resolution is coming today. So have you reached out to Indian side to seek their support?
We have, yeah. We have reached out to the Indian side to seek their support. And I think China will be high on the agenda, very high on the agenda. The Chancellor has been to China. He will share his impressions with the Prime Minister, I'm sure. And we will see, more engagement of Germany in the Indo-Pacific. We have talked about that before. That might be also on the agenda. So China will be high on the agenda. Swasini, I think.
Actually, it was just the same question about the UNGA vote. I think it's due tonight itself. The question being that, have you seen any, we asked you this at your last press conference as well, since February 24th of 2022, India has not once actually criticized Russia's actions. Prime Minister Modi may have said this is not the era of war, but there's been no direct criticism of Russia's actions. India has not voted for any resolution at the United Nations, IAEA, HRC, all the rest, that seeks to criticize Russia. If India does not vote for the UNGA resolution tonight, which essentially is about calling for a lasting peace, would that be a disappointment?
Well, as far as India, I think you know that we would have loved India to vote on these resolutions like we did, but it's a sovereign decision of any country to vote or abstain, or vote yes or abstain. We have reached out to the Indian side. We don't know how they will react tonight. What I see is that you can sit down with the Indian side and have a very, very intelligent, in-depth conversation and discussion on this matter. There is a lot of overlap in thinking. That's my impression. Whether that leads to a more international exposure, it's a question that the Indian side must answer.
That's right. Maybe I'm from the business side, especially in light of yesterday's speech made by Russian President Putin. Do you think that there is scope of harsher economic sanctions against Russia?
I think that will depend. I mean, I think we are at our 8th sanctions package now in the EU, and I think or 9.
No, it's the 10th.
10th. Oh, you're better than me. So it's number 10, and I think we will always think, as long as this war is going on, how to show clearly to the Russian side that comes at a cost. It comes at a cost. It must come at a cost. And in spite of what President Putin said, we know it comes at a cost, and it is a very difficult situation in Russia. Now, let me say also at this very moment is sanctions are never forever. One can imagine a situation where sanctions have to be lifted. It's a temporary measure. I think that if the Russians behave in a certain way, there is also the question whether sanctions should be lifted. We don't see them behaving this way so far, and when I listened to Putin yesterday, I don't think that's going to happen very soon. But it is clear that the Russians must understand if they don't change their behavior in Ukraine, it comes at an economic cost, and that is expressed, amongst other things, by sanctions.
Are there any other questions?
A follow-up question to what was asked earlier on the defense domain. I do understand that the
something that we decided to revisit. But at least could you tell us the domains, the specific sectors which are going to be the key focus areas as far as defense is concerned? And a separate question, the Kremlin has just announced Putin and Wang Yi's meeting. In the backdrop of the Russia-Ukraine war, specifically from India point of view, because Russia, from India point of view, is a strategic ally, at the same time China has been an adversary. Is the West, or specifically Germany, being worried about the Russia and China both coming together and they have been kind of forming an alliance?
So defense cooperation, let me say that there is a very elaborate defense partnership between Germany and India already. It is, it's on a case-by-case basis, and we have been a provider of mostly technology to many parts of the Indian armed forces for years. The question is whether one could lift this cooperation on, you mentioned the submarines, on another level. We have always had, some very good cooperation with the Indian side in this field. So I think it's a broad range of defense contracts and this which is at stake, and this will be certainly discussed. When it comes to the China question, I would say we see with a certain concern that when Russia gets more and more dependent on China, Russia shifts towards the east, and they look to China as the new way of making business. We have learned the hard way that it's never good to be dependent on one country alone. Our lesson was being dependent on Russian on gas and fossil fuel. It is, I would say, not recommendable to put all your eggs in one basket in this case. So I see the danger. We are following that with concern. And there is the danger that Russia gets the junior partner of China to a certain extent under this current circumstances. But that's not what Russia wants, clearly. But maybe it's unavoidable. Yeah.
The Indo-Pacific is of great geopolitical significance at the moment. What are the expectations that the Bundeskanzler has of India in this way?
I think India is a very, very interested and very interesting and trusted partner in the Indo-Pacific. You have seen that Germany has sent a frigate last year. We are planning to send one next year. There is more Air Force deployment in many ways. We will be much more present in the Indo-Pacific than before, and India, for us, is there one of the most interesting partners. And I think we share a lot of concerns with India concerning the Indo-Pacific, and therefore I think our military cooperation will be very, very focused on the Indo-Pacific.
Excellency, I am Akhilesh Suman from Sunset TV. You are going to give tanks to Ukraine, and President Biden has also announced the same. There are always talk of war from Putin's side and from NATO side, but where is the talk of peace? What are the efforts for peace is going on, either behind the scene, third by a back channel? Because you are one of the countries who are part of the Indian agreement, but now there is no mark. So any effort when Chancellor is coming here, any tangible talk will take place between Prime Minister Modi and him?
I have to say I'm pretty pessimistic about that right now. I think you can be sure that diplomacy is going on behind the curtains. Not that you, and including me, are aware of it. There's always a sort of attempt to come to a more constructive approach to things. But when you listen to the Russian side, I don't see any readiness. I don't see any intention to really come to a more constructive attitude when it comes to the Ukraine crisis. I think the Russian president has given the order, we will fight until we win, and that will take maybe a long time. We will not start pushing one side to an agreement when the other side is not ready to compromise. Therefore I think diplomacy is certainly going on. You know that even the Americans talk with the Russians on a certain level regularly, but I don't see a very fruitful and very promising path to peace negotiations right now. After this speech yesterday, I must say I'm very pessimistic.
Are there any other questions?
I just have one question with respect to My question is rather specific because you spoke about biodiversity and early on in your comments. So, with respect to India's projects that are going to be launched in the Andamans, and it's not only a strategically important spot; it is also a very it also has very precarious biodiversity value. So. Is there going to be any way, because yes, India is going ahead, is there a way that Germany can kind of make an intervention that all the verticals are...
I must say that I'm not aware of a project we have in the Andamans. I should look into that. We have a very, very good number of projects in this biodiversity area. I'm not sure whether we are working in the Andamans. I will look it up. I don't know. But we have in the south quite a lot of interesting projects when it comes to wildlife preservation, and also here in the surrounding of Delhi you have quite a lot of projects of reforestation, this kind of stuff. So, but Andamans I'm not aware. Let me check.
Sure, thank you.
Any other questions? Back and forth? No? It's really nice.
Thank you very much. I'm looking forward to a good visit. Thanks for coming, and again apologies for the delay at the beginning.
Thank you.
Press interruption with the Chancellor?
There'll be